Step into the art of Poirot, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot masters the craft of mystery. In the shadowed halls of Marsdon Manor, a scream pierces the night. A young heiress collapses. A threatening letter warns of sins laid bare, and a vial of chloroform hints at sinister intent. Was it a ghostly figure, a family betrayal, or a calculated crime? Enter Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective whose little gray cells unravel a web of lies, greed, and murder. As secrets unravel, hidden letters, stolen funds, and a fatal dose, who in this closed circle of suspects is the mastermind? Will Poirot expose the truth before another strike? Dive into a classic Agatha Christie-style mystery where every clue matters and the shocking reveal will leave you stunned. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Marsdon Manor. The autumn of 1925 draped the English countryside in a golden shroud, and Marsdon Manor, nestled in the heart of Devon, stood as a monument to both grandeur and decay. The estate, with its ivy-clad towers and mullioned windows, seemed to whisper secrets through the crisp air. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the faithful chronicler of Hercule Poirot's exploits, gazed upon the manor from the window of a rattling taxicab, his thoughts a mixture of curiosity and unease. The invitation had arrived 2 days prior, penned in the elegant, slanting hand of Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, widow of the late Sir Reginald Blackwood. It was an urgent summons, though maddeningly vague. A matter of utmost delicacy, she had written, requesting Poirot's presence at Marsdon Manor for a weekend gathering. Poirot, with his unerring instinct for intrigue, had accepted at once, his mustache twitching with anticipation. Hastings, as ever, was swept along in his friend's wake, half expecting a quiet country retreat and half dreading the storm that so often followed Poirot's arrival. The cab jolted to a stop before the manor's iron gates, which creaked open as if reluctant to admit visitors. The gravel drive stretched toward the house, flanked by ancient yews that cast long, somber shadows. Hastings stepped out, his boots crunching against the stones, and glanced at Poirot, who adjusted his impeccable Homburg hat with a gloved hand. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his green eyes gleaming. Blackwoods, their eyes seeming to follow the visitors. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and fading roses. In the drawing-room, Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood awaited them, seated in a high-backed chair, like a queen holding court. She was a woman of perhaps 50, her auburn hair streaked with silver, her posture rigid yet graceful. Her eyes, sharp and searching, betrayed a mind accustomed to command. Beside her stood a young woman, introduced as Miss Clara Blackwood, her niece, whose delicate features and nervous hands suggested a temperament less assured than her aunt's. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," Mrs. Blackwood began, her voice low and measured. "I am grateful you have come. Marsdon Manor is not accustomed to disturbances, but I fear we are on the brink of one." Poirot inclined his head, his hands clasped behind his back. "Madame, you speak of delicacy, yet your words suggest a matter most grave. Pray, enlighten Hercule Poirot." Mrs. Blackwood hesitated, her gaze flickering to Clara, who looked away, clutching a lace handkerchief. "It concerns my late husband's estate," she said at last. "Sir Reginald's will has caused discontent among the family. There have been threats, veiled but unmistakable. I fear for our safety, Mr. Poirot, and I wish you to uncover the source of this unrest before it escalates." Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "Threats, Mrs. Blackwood? From whom?" She waved a hand as if to dismiss the question, but her composure faltered. "My brother-in-law, Mr. Lionel Blackwood, has been particularly vocal. He believes the will unjust. Then there is my stepson Jonathan, who, well, he has his own grievances, and others, guests, associates, who may have their own motives." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but his tone remained smooth. "And the nature of these threats, madame? Letters? Words spoken in anger? A letter, Clara interjected, her voice trembling. Unsigned, left in the library 3 days ago. It spoke of retribution, of secrets that would destroy us. May I see this letter? Poirot asked. Mrs. Blackwood nodded to Grayson, who produced a son from his first marriage, brooding and resentful. Dr. Ernest Fowler, the family physician, a reserved man with a keen interest in toxicology. Miss Sylvia Trent, a distant cousin and aspiring novelist, known for her sharp wit, and Mr. Victor Crane, a solicitor overseeing the estate, whose meticulous nature rivaled Poirot's own. There were also the household staff, Grayson the butler, Mrs. Hargreaves the housekeeper, and a young maid Lily, prone to nervous fits. And you expect all these persons to dine tonight? Poirot asked. Yes, Mrs. Blackwood replied. I thought it best to gather everyone, to observe them, perhaps. An excellent decision, Poirot said, his tone approving. The table, it is the stage where motives are revealed, where the masks, they slip. As the evening approached, the manor's dining room glowed with candlelight, casting flickering shadows across the long mahogany table. The guests assembled, each a study in contrasts. Lionel's booming voice clashed with Jonathan's sullen silence. Sylvia's laughter rang out, brittle and forced. Dr. Fowler's measured responses contrasted with Victor Crane's clipped precision. Clara, seated beside her aunt, seemed to shrink into herself, her eyes darting toward the door. Hastings, ever observant of human nature, noted the undercurrent of tension. It's as if they're all waiting for something to happen, he whispered to Poirot. Oui, mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice barely audible. And Hercule Poirot, he waits also. For the truth, it always reveals itself in time. The meal progressed, the clink of silverware punctuating strained conversation. Mrs. Blackwood spoke of the manor's history. Lionel grumbled about inheritance taxes, and Jonathan excused himself early, citing a headache. As dessert was served, a sudden scream pierced the air, echoing from the direction of the library. The guests froze, their faces a tableau of shock and suspicion. Grayson appeared, his face ashen. It's Miss Clara, he stammered. She's collapsed. Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his calm demeanor unshaken. Lead the way, monsieur, he said, his voice steady. The little grey cells, they are ready. As they hurried toward the library, Hastings felt a chill that had little to do with the autumn, clutched in one hand, her face ashen. Dr. Ernest Fowler knelt beside her, his fingers pressed to her wrist, his expression one of professional calm tinged with concern. Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood stood frozen at the threshold, her hand gripping the doorframe, while Lionel Blackwood loomed behind her, his florid face twisted in agitation. Mon Dieu! Poirot exclaimed, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. What has happened here, doctor? Is Mademoiselle Clara alive? She's fainted, Dr. Fowler replied, his voice steady but low. Her pulse is weak but steady. I suspect a severe shock, though what caused it I cannot say. He glanced toward a small table beside Clara, where a crystal glass lay shattered, its contents, a dark amber liquid, spilled across the polished wood. Hastings, ever practical, stepped forward. Shock, you say? Could it be poison? That glass? Patience, Hastings, Poirot interjected, raising a hand. We do not leap to conclusions. First we observe. He knelt beside Clara, his movements precise, almost delicate, as he examined the scene. His gloved fingers hovered over the shattered glass, noting the faint scent of brandy. Interesting, he murmured. The glass, it was not dropped by accident. See how the shards are scattered, so precise, so contained. Mrs. Blackwood, recovering her composure, stepped forward. Mr. Poirot, what does this mean? Clara was perfectly well at dinner. She excused herself to fetch a book, and then this.
Poirot's gaze flickered to the desk, where an open book lay, its pages slightly crumpled. Beside it was a single sheet of paper, identical in texture to the threatening letter from earlier, though this one bore no writing. He picked it up, his eyes narrowing. "And this, madame? Was it here when you last saw the library?" Mrs. Blackwood shook her head. "I don't know. The library is used by all the guests. Anyone could have left it." Lionel Blackwood snorted, pushing past the others. "This is nonsense. The girl's always been high-strung."
Guests, Sylvia Trent, the aspiring novelist, stood clutching her shawl, her sharp eyes darting between Clara and the desk. Victor Crane, the solicitor, adjusted his spectacles, his lips pursed as if calculating some unseen ledger. Jonathan Blackwood, who had returned upon hearing the commotion, leaned against the wall, his expression unreadable. "Doctor," Poirot said, "you will ensure Mademoiselle Clara is taken to her room and attended. But first, tell me, what is this brandy? Was it poured for her?" Dr. Fowler hesitated. "The decanter is kept on that table for anyone to use. I poured myself a glass earlier this evening, around 8 o'clock. It was perfectly fine then." "Perfectly fine," Poirot echoed, his tone neutral. "And yet here we are." He straightened, brushing an imaginary speck from his coat. "Hastings, assist the doctor in moving Mademoiselle Clara. The rest of you, return to the drawing-room. Hercule Poirot will join you shortly." As Clara was carefully lifted and carried upstairs, Hastings whispered to Poirot, "Do you think it's poison after all, or something else entirely?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Something else, mon ami. The brandy. It is a distraction. The true clue lies elsewhere, in the timing, the paper, the scream. The little gray cells, they are already at work." Back in the drawing-room, the guests resumed their seats, though the air was now thick with suspicion. Mrs. Blackwood sat rigidly, her hands folded in her lap, while Lionel paced, muttering about hysterical women. Sylvia attempted to lighten the mood with a quip about Gothic novels, but it fell flat. Victor Crane, ever the observer, watched the others with a quiet intensity, while Jonathan's brooding silence seemed to deepen. Poirot re-entered, his presence commanding, despite his diminutive stature. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft yet piercing, "a small incident has occurred, but it is not without significance. Mademoiselle Clara's collapse is no mere fainting spell. It is a signal, a warning perhaps, of what is to come. I ask you now, who was in the library this evening, before or after dinner?" A chorus of denials followed. Lionel claimed he'd been in the billiard room. "Library this evening?" Mrs. Hargreaves hesitated, her hands tightening on the tray. I saw Lily, the maid, carrying a tray of glasses to the kitchen around 9. She passed the library door, but I don't know if she entered." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. "Merci, you may go." As the housekeeper departed, Hastings leaned close. "What do you make of it, Poirot? A prank or something more sinister?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Sinister, Hastings? Perhaps, but it is too early to say. What is certain is this: Marsdon Manor is a house of secrets, and tonight one of them has begun to unravel. We must watch, we must listen, and above all, we must think." The clock on the mantel struck 10, its chimes heavy in the silence. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows of Marsdon Manor. Hastings felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from the certainty that the night's events were only the beginning. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning sun struggled through the heavy clouds over Marsdon Manor, casting a pallid light across the estate's sprawling lawns. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive. Clara Blackwood, now recovered from her fainting spell, sat in her room under Dr. Fowler's watchful eye, her face pale but composed. The other guests, scattered about the manor, seemed to tread lightly, as if fearing the very walls might betray their secrets. Captain Hastings, however, found himself in the morning room, sipping a cup of strong tea, when Hercule Poirot entered with his characteristic briskness. "Bon matin, Hastings," Poirot said, adjusting his tie with a flourish. "You look troubled, mon ami. Is it the tea or the events of last night that disturb you?" Hastings set down his cup, frowning. "It's this whole affair, Poirot. Clara's collapse, that mysterious letter, the brandy. There's something devilishly odd about it all, and no one seems to know anything, or so they claim." Poirot's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Odd, yes, but not incomprehensible. The little gray cells, they are already arranging the pieces. Last night—"
Far from convinced. "And the letter itself, madame? Has any other such missive appeared?" "Not yet," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I fear it is only a matter of time." Poirot dismissed her with a polite smile, then turned to Hastings. "Come, mon ami, let us visit the library once more. The scene of the crime, if crime it was, holds more secrets than it has yet revealed." The library was much as they had left it, though the spilled brandy had been cleaned and the shattered glass removed. Poirot moved with methodical precision, examining the desk, the book Clara had been reading, a volume of Gothic tales, and the heavy velvet curtain Grayson's glance had betrayed the previous night. He parted the curtain, revealing a tall window that overlooked the garden. The latch was secure, but Poirot's fingers lingered on a faint scratch near the frame. "Curious," he murmured. "A mark so small yet so deliberate. Hastings, what do you make of it?" Hastings peered at the scratch, barely visible in the morning light. "Could be nothing, Poirot. A careless servant, perhaps, moving furniture." "Non, non," Poirot said, shaking his head. "In a house such as this, nothing is careless. This mark, it speaks of purpose. But what purpose? We shall see." Their inspection was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Japp, a familiar figure from Scotland Yard, whose sturdy frame and no-nonsense demeanour contrasted sharply with Poirot's elegance. Japp had been summoned by Mrs. Blackwood at Poirot's suggestion, a precaution in case Clara's collapse proved more than a fainting spell. "Well, Poirot," Japp said, tipping his hat, "you've landed yourself in another fine mess, haven't you? Fainting ladies, mysterious letters, what's next? A body in the billiard room?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Inspector, your humour is as robust as ever. But let us not jest prematurely. Mademoiselle Clara's collapse is no mere swoon, I think. There is a pattern here, a design." Japp raised an eyebrow. "A design? You're seeing conspiracies in spilt brandy, old man. Still, I've got my men checking the grounds, and I'll have a word with the girl myself. Anything—" Out of sight. Then I felt faint, and the next thing I knew, I was here. Poirot's gaze was gentle but piercing. "Mademoiselle, you say you felt watched. Did you hear anything? A sound? A movement?" She hesitated, twisting her handkerchief. "A rustle, perhaps? Like fabric moving, but it was so faint I thought I imagined it." Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. He next spoke with Lionel Blackwood, whose bluster filled the study where they met. "This is all a lot of nonsense," Lionel declared, his face flushed. "Clara's always been delicate. As for that letter, it's probably some prank by the staff. You're wasting your time, Poirot." "And yet, Monsieur Blackwood," Poirot said smoothly, "you were vocal about your brother's will. Tell me, what is it that you find so unjust?" Lionel's eyes narrowed. "Reginald left the bulk of the estate to Eleanor and Clara, cutting me out almost entirely. After all I did for him, it's an outrage, but I'd never stoop to threats." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Of course, monsieur. But the heart. It sometimes speaks louder than the head, non? The interviews continued. Sylvia Trent claimed to have been writing in her room, though her ink-stained fingers suggested recent activity. Victor Crane admitted to reviewing estate documents in the study until 8:30. Jonathan, still sullen, insisted he'd been in his room all evening. Each alibi was precise, yet Poirot's expression grew more thoughtful with each conversation. As the morning wore on, Hastings joined Poirot in the garden, where Japp's men were indeed finding faint impressions in the soft earth below the library window. "Footprints, Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed. "You were right. Someone was out here last night." "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said, examining the prints. Small, shallow, and partially obscured by leaves. But whose feet, and why? The answer, it lies not only in the ground, but in the minds of those within the manor. The clock struck noon, its chimes echoing across the estate. Poirot straightened. "Accident. No simple feint. It is a piece of a puzzle. And Hercule Poirot, he will fit the pieces together. But for this I require your honesty. Each of you holds a fragment of the truth. Speak it, and we shall see what picture emerges." Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, seated at the center, straightened, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Mr. Poirot, we are all shaken by what happened to Clara. But surely you don't suspect one of us of foul play?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madame, I suspect nothing. Yet. I observe, I listen, I ask questions. And so, let us begin." He turned to Dr. Ernest Fowler, who sat with his medical bag at his feet, his face a mask of professional detachment. "Doctor, you were quick to attend Mademoiselle Clara last night. Tell me, what did you observe when you reached her?" Dr. Fowler cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. "She was unconscious, her pulse weak but regular. No signs of injury, though her pupils were slightly dilated, which could indicate shock, or something else. The brandy glass was shattered, as you saw, but I detected no unusual odor beyond the alcohol itself." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "And you, doctor, poured yourself a glass from that same decanter earlier. At what time, precisely?" 8 o'clock, perhaps a few minutes past," Fowler replied. "I was in the library, reviewing some notes. The brandy was untainted then, I assure you." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured, his gaze shifting to Sylvia Trent, whose sharp eyes met his with a hint of defiance. "Mademoiselle Trent, you are a writer of novels, oui? You observe the human heart. What did you see last night, before or after dinner?" Sylvia's lips curved into a wry smile. "I'm afraid I'm not as observant as you, Mr. Poirot. I was in my room, working on a manuscript, until dinner at 8. Afterward, I returned to my writing until I heard Clara's scream. I saw nothing unusual, though I did notice Jonathan leave the dining room rather abruptly." Jonathan Blackwood, slouched in a corner chair, bristled. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Room. I had no reason to visit the library." "And yet," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "the library is near the study, is it not? A short walk, perhaps, for a man curious about the estate's papers, or its secrets." Crane's lips thinned, but he said nothing. Poirot turned to Lionel Blackwood, whose impatience was palpable. "Monsieur Blackwood, you were in the billiard room, you say? With whom?" "No one," Lionel snapped. "I was practicing shots, blowing off steam. This whole business with Reginald's will has me fed up, but I wasn't anywhere near the library, and I don't care for your insinuations." Poirot raised a hand, placating. "Insinuations? No. Questions, merely. And you, Madame Blackwood? You remained in the dining room after Mademoiselle Clara left?" "Yes," Mrs. Blackwood said, her voice steady. "I was discussing household matters with Mrs. Hargreaves until the scream brought us running." Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "And the staff? Grayson, Mrs. Hargreaves, Lily. Where were you at 9:15 when Mademoiselle Clara entered the library?" Grayson stepped forward, his expression impassive. "I was in the pantry, sir, preparing the dessert tray. Mrs. Hargreaves was with me, and Lily was in the kitchen washing dishes." Mrs. Hargreaves nodded, though her hands twisted nervously. "That's right, sir. We were all in the service areas." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Merci. Your accounts are most helpful. But there is one detail that troubles Hercule Poirot." He produced the blank sheet of paper from the library desk, holding it up for all to see. "This paper, found beside Mademoiselle Clara, matches the threatening letter. Who placed it there? And why?" A murmur rippled through the room, but no one spoke. Sylvia's eyes darted to Lionel, who glared at the floor. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably, while Crane's fingers twitched, as if longing for a ledger to organize the chaos. Hastings, unable to contain himself, whispered, "Poirot, do you think someone tampered with the brandy after all? Or was it staged to frighten Clara?" Guests dispersed. Hastings followed Poirot to the library once more. "You're building a case, aren't you?" he said. "But against whom?" "Everyone has an alibi." Poirot's smile was serene. "Alibis, Hastings, are like clocks. They appear precise, but they can be set to deceive. We must look beyond the surface, to the motives that lie beneath. The little grey cells, they are never idle." The afternoon deepened, and Marsdon Manor seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the next act in its unfolding drama. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The afternoon at Marsdon Manor hung heavy with suspicion, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and impending rain. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the gathering clouds, sat in the morning room, a small notebook open before him, his fountain pen scratching precise notations. Captain Hastings, restless as ever, paced near the window, watching the garden where Inspector Japp's men continued their search for clues. "Poirot," Hastings said, turning abruptly, "this whole business is maddening. Everyone's got an alibi, yet Clara's collapse and that threatening letter point to something deliberate. Do you think someone's trying to scare her, or all of them, about the will?" Poirot's eyes remained fixed on his notebook, but his lips curved slightly. "Mon ami, you are impatient, as always. The will, oui, it is at the heart of this affair, but it is not the only thread. The little grey cells, they detect a pattern of misdirection, a red herring, as you English say." "A red herring?" Hastings echoed, frowning. "You mean someone's deliberately leading us astray?" "Précisément," Poirot replied, closing his notebook with a snap. "And it is time we follow this false trail to see where it leads." Their conversation was interrupted by Inspector Japp, who entered with a purposeful stride, a folded piece of cloth in his hand. "Poirot, we've found something in the garden, near those footprints you were so keen on." A handkerchief, monogrammed with the letter L. "Found it caught on a rose bush, not 10 feet from the library window."
Voice quavering. "I was in the kitchen all evening, like Mrs. Hargreaves said." Poirot's tone was gentle, almost paternal. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot does not accuse. Tell me, this handkerchief with the L dash, is it yours?" Lily glanced at the cloth, her face paling. "No, sir, I don't own anything so fine. My handkerchiefs are plain cotton, no monograms." "And last night," Poirot pressed, "did you pass the library door around 9:15, as Mrs. Hargreaves said?" "Yes, sir," Lily admitted, twisting her apron. "I was carrying a tray to the kitchen.
I didn't go in, I swear, but I did hear something, a sort of creak, like a floorboard. I thought it was just the house settling. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A creak, you say, from the library? Yes, sir, but I didn't stop to look. I was in a hurry to finish my work. Merci, mademoiselle, Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod. As they left the kitchen, Hastings whispered, She's terrified, Poirot. Do you think she's hiding something? Perhaps, Poirot replied, but fear is not always guilt. She is a small fish, Hastings, and someone has cast her as the red herring. The next stop was the billiard room, where Lionel Blackwood was practicing shots with a vigor that bordered on aggression. The clack of the balls echoed sharply as Poirot entered, holding up the handkerchief. Monsieur Blackwood, this L, it could stand for Lionel, no? Lionel's cue paused mid-strike, his face reddening. What are you implying, Poirot? That I was skulking in the garden, dropping handkerchiefs? I told you, I was here all evening. Alone, you said, Poirot noted, his voice smooth. No one to confirm your presence. Lionel slammed the cue onto the table. This is outrageous. I'm not some sneak thief creeping about. Ask anyone. I'm not the sort to play childish games with letters or brandy. Poirot's smile was serene. Of course, monsieur. But the handkerchief, it is curious, is it not? And your discontent with the will, it gives one pause. Lionel muttered something unintelligible and stormed out, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone. He's got a moment. This handkerchief, does either of you recognize it? Sylvia glanced at it, her expression unreadable. It's not mine. I use silk, not linen. Crane shook his head, his eyes narrowing behind his spectacles. Nor mine. But L could be Lionel, or even Lily, the maid. Or someone else entirely, Poirot said softly. Tell me, Mademoiselle Trent, your writing. Does it ever include tales of mysterious letters or hidden motives? Sylvia laughed, though it sounded forced. My novels are fiction, Mr. Poirot. I don't go about staging real-life dramas. And you, Monsieur Crane, Poirot continued, as solicitor, you know the details of the will. Is there anything, perhaps a clause, a codicil, that might provoke such threats? Crane hesitated, then shook his head. The will is straightforward. Mrs. Blackwood and Clara inherit the estate, with minor bequests to others. Nothing unusual. Poirot nodded, though his eyes suggested he was far from satisfied. As they left the drawing room, Hastings said, That handkerchief's got everyone pointing fingers, Poirot. It's too convenient, don't you think? Exactement, Poirot replied. It is placed to distract, to accuse, but the true clue lies elsewhere. In the creak Lily heard, in the blank paper, in the motives that simmer beneath these polished surfaces. The red herrings, they multiply. But Hercule Poirot, he sees through them. Outside, the rain began to fall, a soft patter against the manor's windows. Hastings felt a chill, sensing that the storm outside was but a prelude to the one brewing within Marsdon Manor. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The rain that had threatened Marsdon Manor all morning now fell in earnest, drumming against the windows and cloaking the estate in a gray veil. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive, with suspicion hanging over the household like a fog. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the weather, sat in the library, his small notebook open once more, his eyes fixed on the desk where Clara Blackwood had collapsed the previous night. Captain Hastings stood nearby, watching as Poirot's gloved fingers traced the edge of
lingering on the heavy velvet curtain by the window. And there is more. Come. He crossed to the curtain, parting it to reveal the window frame and the faint scratch they had noted the previous day. Poirot produced a small magnifying glass from his pocket, examining the mark with the intensity of a jeweler. This scratch. It is not from a tool or a careless hand. It is too fine, too controlled. Something was placed here or removed with great care.
Hastings frowned, struggling to follow. "You're saying someone tampered with the window?" "But Clara's collapse, surely it was the brandy, or a fright." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The brandy, it is the obvious answer, and thus it is wrong. The little grey cells, they tell me the truth lies in the details, the groove on the desk, the scratch on the frame, the rustle Mademoiselle Clara heard. These are not accidents. Their inspection was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Japp, his coat damp from the rain. "Poirot, you're at it again, poking at every splinter," he said, shaking his head. "My men found nothing more in the garden. The rains washed away any clear prints. But I've had a word with Clara again. She's sticking to her story. Felt watched, heard a rustle, then nothing." Poirot nodded, unsurprised. "And the handkerchief, Inspector? Have you traced its origins?" Japp shrugged. "No luck yet. Could belong to anyone with an L in their name, or none. It's a fine piece, though, not the sort a maid like Lily would own. I'm still betting on Lionel Blackwood. He's got motive with that will cutting him out." "A motive, oui," Poirot said, "but motives are plentiful in this house. We must look to the method." He turned to the desk, pointing to the open book Clara had been reading, a collection of Gothic tales. "This book, it was open to a specific page when we found her. Page 142, a story of a ghostly figure appearing at a window. Curious, non?" Hastings raised an eyebrow. "You think someone staged a ghost to frighten her? That's a bit far-fetched." Felt dizzy, and that's all. "And the book?" Poirot pressed. "Was it already on the desk? Or did you take it from the shelf?" "It was on the desk," she said. "Open, as if someone had been reading it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Most interesting. And the brandy? You did not drink it?" "No," Clara said quickly. "I don't care for spirits. The glass was there, but I didn't touch it." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As they left the room, Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, isn't she? That story about the book being open, it doesn't add up." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but it is not Clara who hides the most. The book, the groove, the scratch, these are the work of a mind that plans, that calculates. Someone wished to create a scene, to direct our attention to the brandy, to the handkerchief. But the true clue is in the timing." They returned to the library, where Poirot examined the book once more. Flipping to page 142, a single line was faintly underlined in pencil. The figure at the window vanished, leaving only terror in its wake. Poirot's smile was triumphant. "Voilà, Hastings, the clue in detail. This line, it was meant to be seen, to plant the idea of a ghostly presence. But it is no ghost we seek. It is a human hand." As they stepped into the hall, they encountered Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, carrying a tray of linens. Her face was pale, her eyes darting nervously. "Mr. Poirot," she said, I found something in the laundry this morning. A piece of black silk, torn, caught in a servant's basket. I thought you should know." Poirot took the scrap of fabric, examining it under his magnifying glass. "Silk, you say? And torn, as if caught in haste. Where was this basket kept?" "Near the back door, sir," Mrs. Hargreaves replied. "It's where we collect linens from the upper floors." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, madame." This eyes scanning the faces of the assembled household. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his gaze drifting to the sodden garden, where the footprints near the library had long since dissolved into the mud. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the low murmur of conversation. "The events of last night have revealed much, yet concealed more. The little gray cells, they work tirelessly, but they require your candor. Secrets, they are like shadows, they grow longer when the light of truth is dim." Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, seated with her usual regal poise, frowned. "Mr. Poirot, we have answered your questions. What more do you seek? Clara is recovering and no harm was done." Poirot's mustache twitched. "No harm, madame? Perhaps. But a threat was made. A scene was staged, and now new threads emerge." He produced the torn scrap of black silk, holding it aloft. "This was found in a laundry basket near the back door. A rustle of silk. Mademoiselle Clara heard. A clue, no?" A ripple of unease passed through the room. Sylvia Trent's sharp eyes narrowed, while Lionel Blackwood's face reddened. "What's this now?" Lionel blustered. "You're accusing us of sneaking about in silk cloaks? This is absurd." "Not absurd, Monsieur Blackwood," Poirot said smoothly. "Merely curious. Let us explore further." He turned to Jonathan Blackwood, whose brooding silence had grown more pronounced. "Monsieur Jonathan, you left the dining room early last night, citing a headache. Yet the library is on the way to your room. Did you perhaps pause there?" Jonathan's jaw tightened, his dark eyes flashing. "I told you I went straight to my room. I had no reason to go to the library or to frighten Clara." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet, monsieur, your discontent with your father's will is no secret. A fortune passes to Mademoiselle Clara, while you receive little. Resentment, it can cloud the judgment, no?" Jonathan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I won't sit here and be accused. Yes, the will's unfair, but I'm no sneak, and I'm no coward who'd resort to tricks." He stormed out, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Hastings leaned close to
Victor Crane, the solicitor, whose meticulous demeanor seemed strained. "Monsieur Crane, you handle the estate's affairs. Tell me, is there a codicil to Sir Reginald's will, something that might explain these tensions?" Crane adjusted his spectacles, his voice measured. "No codicil, Mr. Poirot. The will is clear. Mrs. Blackwood and Clara inherit the estate, with minor bequests to Lionel and Jonathan. There are no hidden clauses." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet the threat speaks of sins laid bare. What sins, Monsieur Crane? What secrets does this family guard?" Before Crane could respond, Mrs. Hargreaves entered, her face pale. "Mr. Poirot, sir, I must speak with you." Her voice trembled, and she glanced nervously at the others. "In private, if you please." Poirot nodded, gesturing for her to lead the way. In the quiet of the pantry, Mrs. Hargreaves clutched her apron, her words spilling out in a rush. "It's about Lily, sir. She's been acting strange since last night. This morning, I caught her burning a letter in the kitchen grate. She said it was nothing, but she was crying, sir, and I heard her mutter something about not meaning to do it." Poirot's expression remained impassive, but his eyes gleamed. "Most interesting, madame. Did you see the letter?" "No, sir," Mrs. Hargreaves said. "It was already ashes. But Lily's been jumpy, and I know she's keeping something from me." "Merci," Poirot said, dismissing her. As they returned to the drawing room, Hastings said, "Lily again, Poirot? First the handkerchief, now a burned letter. She's looking guiltier by the minute." Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. Lily is a pawn, not a player. The burned letter, the silk, the handkerchief. These are distractions, meant to point us to the obvious. But the true secret lies deeper." As they re-entered the drawing room, they found Inspector Japp waiting, his expression grim. "Poirot, we've had a development. One of my men found a vial in the garden, half buried near the library window. Smell..."
Dealing with threats anymore.
Exactement.
Poirot said, his voice low. "The lies, they surface, Hastings. And with them the truth draws closer. We must watch closely. For the next move, it will be bold."
The clock struck 3, its chimes swallowed by the storm. Marsdon Manor, it seemed, was holding its breath for what would come next. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The storm over Marsdon Manor had intensified, its relentless rain battering the windows as if demanding entry. Inside, the drawing room was a crucible of tension, the guests' polite facades crumbling under the weight of Hercule Poirot's relentless probing. Captain Hastings, standing near the fireplace, felt the air crackle with unspoken accusations, each glance between the assembled company laced with suspicion. Poirot, seated in a high-backed chair, surveyed the room with the calm precision of a conductor before a symphony, his notebook closed, but his mind clearly at work. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the low hum of nervous whispers. "The events of this house grow darker. A threatening letter, a staged collapse, a vial of chloroform. These are not accidents, but threads in a tapestry of deceit. Someone among you knows more than they have said. The time for silence, it is over." Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, her composure strained, clasped her hands tightly. "Mr. Poirot, you speak of deceit, but we are a family grieving, not criminals. Clara's incident was alarming, but surely it's the work of an outsider, a disgruntled servant, perhaps?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "An outsider, madame? No. The clues, the silk, the handkerchief, the chloroform, they point inward, to this very room." He paused, letting his words settle, then turned to Clara, who sat pale and silent beside her aunt. "Mademoiselle Clara, you have been the target of this drama, but I wonder, do you know why?" Clara's eyes widened, her fingers twisting her handkerchief. I don't know, Mr. Poirot. I've done nothing to provoke such cruelty. The letter, the library...
This. Poirot's mustache twitched. A victim, oui, but not an innocent one. She hides a truth, Hastings, and it is breaking her. The tension was broken by a sudden outburst from Lionel Blackwood, who slammed his fist on the arm of his chair. "This is intolerable! You accuse us all, Poirot, but what about you, eh? Poking about, stirring up trouble? I say it's that maid, Lily. She's been skulking around, burning letters, dropping handkerchiefs." Poirot turned to him, his expression serene. "Monsieur Blackwood, your anger, it is noted. But the handkerchief with the L, it is too convenient, too obvious. And Lily, she is no mastermind. No, the hand behind this is cleverer, more patient." Sylvia Trent, her sharp wit subdued, spoke up. "Mr. Poirot, you keep hinting at secrets. But what if it's simpler? Someone wants the estate, Clara's inheritance. That's motive enough, isn't it?" Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "A motive, mademoiselle, but not the only one. Secrets, they are not always about money. Love, betrayal, revenge, these too drive the human heart." As if on cue, Jonathan Blackwood, who had returned after his earlier outburst, spoke in a low, bitter voice. "You want secrets, Poirot? Fine, I'll give you one." All eyes turned to him, the room holding its breath. "Clara and I, we were close once, before Father's death. She promised to share the estate with me, to make things right. But after the will was read, she changed. She's keeping it all for herself." Mrs. Blackwood gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Jonathan, how dare you? Clara has done no such thing." Jonathan's eyes burned with resentment. "Hasn't she?
Ask her then. Ask why she's been avoiding me, why she's so eager to play the victim now. Poirot's gaze was piercing. Monsieur Jonathan, this is most revealing. A promise broken, a trust betrayed. This is a motive, no? But tell me, where were you when Mademoiselle Clara collapsed? Your headache, it kept you in your room or elsewhere?
Dispersed, their faces a mixture of relief and unease, Hastings followed Poirot to the hall. Jonathan's confession changes things, doesn't it? If he and Clara had an agreement, her collapse could be his revenge. Perhaps, Poirot said, but revenge, it is too simple. The chloroform, the silk, the underlined book, these are the work of a mind that weaves a story, not merely settles a score. Jonathan's outburst, it is a crack in the facade, but not the whole truth. They paused by the staircase, where Mrs. Hargreaves stood, her face ashen. Mr. Poirot, she whispered, I overheard something just now. Miss Sylvia was talking to Mr. Crane in the study, and she said she knew about a letter Sir Reginald wrote before he died. Not the will, but something else. She sounded frightened. Poirot's eyes lit up. A letter, you say? Merci, madame. This is most significant. As Mrs. Hargreaves hurried away, Poirot turned to Hastings. The lies they unravel, mon ami. A letter from Sir Reginald. A broken promise. A staged collapse. The threads they begin to connect. But we must tread carefully. For the next step, it will be perilous. The storm outside raged on, its thunder echoing through the manor like a warning of truths yet to be revealed. Chapter 9. The Trap. The storm that had battered Marsdon Manor throughout the day began to relent by evening, leaving a restless quiet in its wake. The great house, however, seemed to hum with an undercurrent of dread, as if its walls anticipated the next act in the unfolding drama. Hercule Poirot, his demeanor as polished as ever, had requested the household gather in the drawing-room after dinner, a summons that sent whispers of unease rippling through the guests. Captain Hastings, standing by Poirot's side as they entered, felt the weight of expectant eyes, each guest a player in a game only Poirot seemed to fully understand. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding. Tonight we approach the heart of this mystery. A threatening letter, a staged collapse, a vial of chloroform, a scrap of silk. These are not random acts, but pieces of a careful design. Hercule Poirot has observed, he has listened, and now he sets a trap. The truth, it will reveal itself. Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, seated with rigid dignity, clasped her hands tightly. Mr. Poirot, this talk of traps is unsettling. Surely you don't believe one of us is responsible for such theatrics. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching slightly. Theatrics, madame? Oui, precisely. Someone in this room has orchestrated a performance, and I intend to draw the curtain. He produced the torn scrap of black silk, holding it up for all to see. This silk, found near the library, matches the rustle Mademoiselle Clara heard. And this, he held up the blank sheet of paper from the library desk, matches the threatening letter. Someone wished to frighten, to confuse. But why? Lionel Blackwood, his face flushed, leaned forward. You keep waving that silk about, Poirot, but it proves nothing. Anyone could have dropped it. You're grasping at straws. Poirot's smile was serene. Straws, Monsieur Blackwood? No. Each clue is a thread, and the threads, they weave a pattern. Let us examine another. He turned to Sylvia, expression unreadable. A rumor or a truth? We shall see. He turned to Jonathan Blackwood. whose sullen demeanor had hardened into defiance. "Monsieur Jonathan, you spoke of a promise broken by Mademoiselle Clara. Did this promise involve such a letter, perhaps?" Jonathan's jaw clenched. "I don't know about any letter. Clara said she'd share the estate, but she's gone back on her word. That's all I know." Clara, seated beside her aunt, shook her head, her voice barely audible. "Jonathan, I never meant to hurt you. I don't know what to do about the will." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough! The time for half-truths is past. Let us consider the facts. At 9:15 last night, Mademoiselle Clara entered the library. She heard a rustle, felt watched, and collapsed, likely from chloroform, not brandy. A blank paper, a torn silk, a scratched window frame, these were left to mislead. But there is one detail that betrays the culprit." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. The book on the desk, open to a tale of a ghostly figure. Someone underlined a passage to suggest a supernatural fear. But who had access to that book before Clara entered? A murmur rippled through the room. Dr. Ernest Fowler, his calm demeanor fraying, spoke up. "Mr. Poirot, I was in the library earlier, as I said, but I was reading medical journals, not novels. I didn't touch that book." "Nor did I," Victor Crane added quickly. "I was in the study until dinner. I had no reason to meddle with books or chloroform." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "And yet, someone did. Let us test this. I propose a small experiment." He turned to Grayson, the butler, who stood by the door. "Monsieur Grayson, please fetch the book from the library, the Gothic Tales, still on the desk." Grayson nodded and departed, returning moments later with the volume. Poirot opened it to page 142, the underlined passage stark against the printed text. "Now," he said, "let us imagine the scene. Someone places this book open to—"
"Poirot," she said, her voice trembling. I must confess. I saw something last night before Clara's scream. It was Miss Sylvia slipping out of the library just before 9. I didn't think it mattered. She's always about, writing her stories. But now, I'm not so sure." Sylvia's face drained of color. "That's a lie," she cried. "I was in my room writing." "Mrs. Hargreaves, why would you say such a thing?" Poirot's eyes locked onto Sylvia's. "Mademoiselle, the housekeeper speaks from fear, not malice. And fear, it often reveals the truth. Were you in the library, setting the stage for Clara's collapse?" Sylvia's lips parted, but no words came. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. Hastings felt a chill, sensing that Poirot's trap was about to spring, and with it, a truth that would shake Marsdon Manor to its foundations. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The drawing room of Marsdon Manor was suffused with a tense stillness, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across the faces of the assembled guests. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, immaculate figure commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. Captain Hastings, positioned near the fireplace, felt his pulse quicken, sensing that Poirot's carefully laid trap was about to snap shut. The accusation against Sylvia Trent hung in the air, her pale face and trembling hands betraying a fear she could no longer conceal. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and resonant, "we have arrived at the moment of truth. The events at Marsdon Manor, the threatening letter, Mademoiselle Clara's collapse, the chloroform, the silk, the underlined book. These are not random acts,
but a carefully orchestrated performance. And tonight, Hercule Poirot will reveal the hand behind it. Sylvia Trent, her eyes wide, rose from her chair. Mr. Poirot, I swear I was not in the library. Mrs. Hargreaves is mistaken or lying. I've done nothing.
She's a writer, not a criminal. Poirot's moustache twitched. Madame, the writer. They are skilled in crafting illusions. And Mademoiselle Sylvia, she has crafted a fine one. He turned to Sylvia, his eyes piercing. You were seen leaving the library just before 9, mademoiselle. You spoke of a letter from Sir Reginald, not the will, but something hidden. You knew of its existence, did you not? Sylvia's lips parted, her voice a whisper. I heard rumors, yes. Sir Reginald wrote a letter before he died, confessing something, a secret about the family. I thought it might be in the library, but I never found it. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Victor Crane, the solicitor, whose meticulous facade seemed to waver. Monsieur Crane, you have been silent, but your role, it is not small. As solicitor, you knew of this letter, oui? A letter that could alter the will, perhaps. Crane adjusted his spectacles, his voice tight. I know of no such letter, Mr. Poirot. The will is final, as I've said. And yet, Poirot said, the little grey cells, they detect a lie. Let us consider the facts. The threatening letter promised sins laid bare. Mademoiselle Clara's collapse was staged to frighten, to distract. But the true target was not Clara. It was the letter itself, hidden in this house. Someone wished to find it, or to ensure it remained lost. He paused, turning to Jonathan Blackwood, whose sullen demeanour had given way to a tense alertness. Monsieur Jonathan, you spoke of a broken promise with Mademoiselle Clara, but was it the estate you sought, or this letter? A letter that might reveal a truth about your father's intentions. Jonathan's face darkened. I don't know about any letter. Clara betrayed me, that's enough. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Betrayal, oui, but there is more. He produced the torn book from the library, pointing to the faint tear in the binding. This book, it was opened with force, in haste, and the chloroform vial, found in the garden, bears no fingerprints. Too clean, too perfect. The silk, the handkerchief with the L, these are distractions, meant to point
to render Mademoiselle Clara unconscious, giving you time to search the library for Sir Reginald's letter.
The room gasped, all eyes on Fowler. He stood, his face pale.
This is preposterous. I'm a doctor, not a schemer.
Poirot's voice was relentless. You are both, monsieur. The letter, it contained a confession that Sir Reginald had altered his intentions, leaving a portion of the estate to a charity, not Clara or Mrs. Blackwood. You, as the family physician, knew of his failing health, his regrets. You sought the letter to destroy it, to protect the estate for your own gain, perhaps a promise of payment from another party. Fowler's hands trembled, his voice breaking. You have no proof. No, Poirot said, producing a small folded paper from his pocket. This, found in your medical bag this afternoon, is a draft of the threatening letter, typed on the same machine as the original, and the tear in the book's binding matches the scalpel in your kit. The little grey cells, they do not err. Fowler collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. I only wanted to protect the family. The letter would have ruined them, caused a scandal. I thought, a small fright, and I could find it. Mrs. Blackwood's voice was icy. Ernest, how could you? Poirot raised a hand. He acted not alone, madame. Mademoiselle Sylvia, you knew of the letter and aided him, did you not? Your rumor was a confession to Mrs. Hargreaves, hoping to deflect suspicion. Sylvia's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know about the chloroform. I only helped him look for the letter, to protect Clara's inheritance.
The room erupted in murmurs, but Poirot's voice cut through. "The trap, it has sprung. The letter is safe, and the truth is revealed. Inspector Japp, you may take Dr. Fowler into custody." Japp, who had been listening intently, stepped forward, his handcuffs ready. "Well done, Poirot. I thought it was Lionel, but you've outdone yourself again." As Fowler was led away, the manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. Hastings, stunned, whispered, "Poirot, how did you know? The little grey
Work was not yet complete.
Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft but resonant, "the mystery of Marsdon Manor is resolved. Dr. Fowler, aided by Mademoiselle Sylvia, sought to conceal a letter that threatened the estate's inheritance. A letter written by Sir Reginald Blackwood, confessing his intent to divert a portion of his wealth to charity. Their method, chloroform, a staged collapse, a threatening note, was clever, but not clever enough to elude Hercule Poirot." Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, her regal composure restored, inclined her head. "Mr. Poirot, we owe you a great debt. But this letter, where is it now? And what does it mean for us?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "The letter, madame, is safe. I found it last night, hidden in the binding of the Gothic Tales book, where Dr. Fowler overlooked it in his haste. It confirms Sir Reginald's wish to donate a significant sum to a local orphanage, a decision he made in his final days. As for what it means, that is for you and Mademoiselle Clara to decide. The heart, it must guide the hand." Clara, pale but resolute, spoke softly. I want to honor grandfather's wishes. The estate is vast. There's enough for us and for his charity. Jonathan, I never meant to betray you. We can share it, as we promised." Jonathan Blackwood, his sullen demeanor softened, nodded slowly. "I was wrong to doubt you, Clara. I let bitterness cloud my judgment. I'm sorry." Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. "The family. It heals when truth is its foundation. But let us reflect, mes amis, on the nature of this affair. Dr. Fowler, he was not driven by greed alone, but by loyalty, misguided, perhaps, to protect the Blackwood name from scandal. Mademoiselle Sylvia, she acted out of fear for her cousin's future. Their crimes were small, their motives complex. The human heart, it is a labyrinth, no?" Hastings, bluster subdued, cleared his throat. "I suppose I owe you an apology, Poirot. I thought you were chasing shadows, but thank you. This family's been torn apart long enough." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur, the shadows, they are dispelled by light. You have only to embrace it." As the guests began to disperse, their voices softer, their steps lighter, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Come, mon ami, let us take a turn in the garden. The air, it is fresh, and the mind, it requires repose." Outside, the lawn glistened with rain, the yews standing sentinel in the morning mist. Hastings, walking beside Poirot, said, "You've done it again, Poirot. Wrapped it all up neatly like a parcel. But tell me, did you suspect Fowler from the start?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "From the start? No. But from the moment I saw the book, the chloroform, the careful staging, I knew we dealt with a mind that planned, that calculated. Dr. Fowler, he was too calm, too quick to dismiss the brandy as harmless. The little grey cells, they do not sleep." Hastings laughed. "You're insufferable, Poirot, but I wouldn't have you any other way." Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression serene. "The world, it is a place of disorder, Hastings. But with method, with logic, with the little gray cells, we bring order to chaos. And now we depart. Marsdon Manor has its peace, and Hercule Poirot, he has his satisfaction. As they walked toward the waiting cab, the manor loomed behind them, its secrets laid bare, its wounds beginning to heal. The autumn sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the estate, and Hastings felt a quiet certainty that Poirot's genius had once again triumphed over the darkness. Chapter 12. The Unseen Motive. The morning mist had lifted from Marsdon Manor, revealing a landscape softened by the previous day's rain. The house, though, seemed to carry a lingering weight, as if its stones still held echoes of the secrets so recently exposed. Hercule Poirot, his demeanor as meticulous as ever, sat in the morning room with Captain Hastings, a tray of tea between them. The guest, Shadow Dr. Fowler, acted to protect the Blackwood name. But was it only loyalty? And Mademoiselle Sylvia, her fear, it was too great for a mere accomplice. Before Hastings could respond, Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood entered, her face pale but composed. "Mr. Poirot, I must speak with you. Clara is distressed. She's locked herself in her room and refuses to come out. She says there's more to this affair, something she's afraid to tell." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Most interesting, madame. And you, do you know what troubles her?" Mrs. Blackwood hesitated, her hands twisting together. "She mentioned a conversation with Dr. Fowler before all this began. Something about my late husband's health. She wouldn't say more, but she's terrified." Poirot rose, his movements brisk. "Then we must speak with Mademoiselle Clara at once. Hastings, come. The tapestry, it unravels further." They found Clara in her room, seated by the window, her eyes red from crying. The door was unlocked, but her posture suggested a desire to retreat from the world. "Mr. Poirot," she whispered, "I didn't want to say anything before. I thought it was over, but I can't keep silent anymore." Poirot sat opposite her, his tone gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle, the truth, it is a burden only when it is hidden. Speak, and let Hercule Poirot guide you." Clara took a shuddering breath. "Dr. Fowler, he told me months ago that grandfather's death wasn't natural. He said there were signs, irregularities in his heart, traces of a substance in his blood. He swore me to secrecy, said it would ruin the family if it came out. I thought he was protecting us, but now I'm not sure." Hastings gasped, but Poirot's expression remained calm, his eyes alight with sudden clarity. "A substance, you say? And this letter from Sir Reginald, did it mention his suspicions about his own death?" Clara nodded, tears spilling over. "Yes, he wrote it the day before he died. He said he feared someone close to him was hastening his end. He didn't name anyone, but he wanted the truth known, and the charity bequest was chloroform to the staged collapse. But there is more. Sir Reginald's letter spoke of poison, of a betrayal by one close to him. You, as his physician, knew his condition intimately. Did you hasten his death?" Fowler's composure cracked, his hands trembling. "You have no proof, Poirot. I cared for Sir Reginald. I would never harm him." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice relentless, "Clara speaks of irregularities, of a substance in his blood. You silenced her, used her fear to stage this charade in the library, to find and destroy the letter. But you failed, monsieur. The letter, it is safe, and it accuses you." Fowler's shoulders slumped, his voice barely audible. I didn't mean for him to die. I gave him a sedative, stronger than needed, to calm his agitation. He was raving about betrayal, about changing his will. I thought I was helping, but it was too much." His heart failed. Poirot's eyes were cold. "And the letter? It would have exposed your error. Perhaps your intent. So you frightened Clara, used chloroform to search the library, enlisted Mademoiselle Sylvia to aid you. But the truth, it cannot be buried. Inspector Japp, who had entered during the exchange, shook his head. Good Lord, Poirot, you've done it again. Murder, not just mischief. I'll need a full statement, Fowler. As Fowler was led away, his head bowed, Hastings turned to Poirot. You suspected this all along, didn't you? That's why you pressed Clara. Poirot's smile was faint. Not all along, Hastings. But the pieces, they whispered of a deeper crime. The letter, the chloroform, Clara's fear, they pointed to a truth beyond the surface. The little grey cells, they do not rest until all is clear. The manor seemed to sigh as the weight of its secrets lifted, but Hastings felt a lingering unease. What happens now, Poirot? The family, they'll be shattered. Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression serene. They will heal, mon ami. The truth, it wounds, but it also mends. And Hercule Poirot, he ensures justice is done. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a tentative light over Marsdon. Sir Reginald and Sylvia admitted to helping him search for the letter. What's left? Why do you look so unsettled? Poirot's moustache twitched, his fingers tapping lightly on the notebook. Mon ami, the case, it appears, resolved, yet the little grey cells, they are not satisfied. Dr. Fowler's confession explains much, the chloroform, the staged collapse, the search for the letter. But why, Hastings, did he act alone? And why was Mademoiselle Sylvia so quick to aid him? There is a hidden truth, a motive deeper than we have seen. Hastings frowned, his mind grappling with the implications. You think there's someone else involved? Another accomplice? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Not an accomplice, perhaps, but a catalyst. The letter from Sir Reginald. It spoke of betrayal by one close to him. Fowler admitted to the sedative, but was he the only one Sir Reginald feared? We must look again, Hastings, at the heart of this family. Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, who entered the library with a hesitant step. Her face, usually so composed, bore traces of sleeplessness. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice low, I must speak with you. Clara is calmer now, but she's said something troubling about my late husband's final days. She believes there was another person he suspected, not just Dr. Fowler. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Another person, madame? Did Mademoiselle Clara name them? Mrs. Blackwood shook her head, her hands twisting together. No, but she said Sir Reginald was agitated, speaking of someone who had deceived him cruelly. I thought it was his illness, but now I'm not certain. Poirot rose, his movements brisk. Merci, madame. This is most significant. I must speak with Mademoiselle Clara again, and then, perhaps, we shall see the final piece of this puzzle. They found Clara in the garden, seated on a stone bench beneath a leafless oak, her shawl wrapped tightly around her. Her eyes, though still red from crying, held a new resolve. Mr. Poirot, she said as they approached, I've been thinking. Wife? Poirot shook his head. Non, Hastings, the little grey cells, they suggest another. Let us summon the household once more. Poirot shook his head. In the drawing room the guests reassembled, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and apprehension. Mrs. Blackwood sat rigidly, Clara beside her, while Jonathan, Lionel, Sylvia and Victor Crane occupied their usual seats. Inspector Japp, sensing another revelation, stood by the door, his notebook ready. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, holding up the letter. The case of Marsdon Manor is not yet closed. Dr. Fowler confessed to hastening Sir Reginald's death, but there is another truth, a name, scratched out in this letter, beginning with E. Sir Reginald feared a betrayal. not only by his physician but by one closer still.
Mrs. Blackwood's hand flew to her chest.
Mr. Poirot, you cannot mean me. I loved Reginald. I would never harm him. Poirot's gaze softened. No, madame, not you. The E, it stands for Ernest, Dr. Ernest Fowler, but also for another, one who manipulated events from the shadows. He turned to Victor Crane, whose meticulous facade seemed to falter. Monsieur Crane, you have been silent, precise, the perfect solicitor. But you knew of Sir Reginald's letter, did you not? You, who handled his affairs, who stood to lose if the charity bequest was revealed. Crane's spectacles glinted as he stood, his voice tight. This is absurd, Poirot. I've done nothing but serve this family. And yet, Poirot said, his voice relentless, you urged Dr. Fowler to act. You knew of Sir Reginald's suspicions, his failing health. You suggested the sedative, knowing it might be fatal, to secure the estate's wealth for your own commission. The chloroform, the staged collapse. It was your idea, executed by Fowler, to find and destroy the letter. Crane's face drained of color, his hands trembling. You have no proof. Poirot produced a small notebook from his pocket, Crane's own, confiscated during a discreet search. This, monsieur, contains your notes on the estate's value, with calculations of your commission if the charity bequest was suppressed, and a draft bare, as the sun climbed higher, casting a hopeful light over Marsdon Manor. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The afternoon sun bathed Marsdon Manor in a golden glow, its light filtering through the tall windows and softening the austere grandeur of the old house. The revelations of the morning had left the household in a state of quiet shock, as if the very walls were processing the unmasking of Victor Crane as the orchestrator behind Dr. Fowler's actions. Hercule Poirot, seated in the library with his ever-present notebook, exuded a calm satisfaction, though his sharp eyes suggested the case was not entirely closed. Captain Hastings, standing by the fireplace, fidgeted with a restless energy, his mind still reeling from the morning's confrontation. Poirot, Hastings said, breaking the silence, you've done it again. Pulled the rabbit out of the hat. Fowler and Crane, both caught in your trap. But I can't shake the feeling there's something more. The family, they're still so tense, as if they're waiting for another shoe to drop. Poirot's mustache twitched, his fingers pausing over his notebook. Mon ami, your instincts, they improve. Oui, the case is resolved in its essentials. Dr. Fowler's fatal error, Crane's manipulation, the letter's secrets. But there are threads yet to be tied. The heart of Marsdon Manor, it beats with unresolved pain. We must ensure no shadow remains. Their conversation was interrupted by the soft tread of Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, who entered with a weary grace. Her eyes, though composed, betrayed a lingering sorrow. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice steady but low, you have brought us truth, at great cost. But Clara, she's withdrawn again. She says there's something she hasn't told you, something about Jonathan. I fear this family will never find peace. Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone was firm. Madame, peace comes only when all is revealed. Send Mademoiselle Clara to me, and we shall weave the final threads of this tapestry. Clara appeared moments later, her delicate frame wrapped in a shawl, her eyes haunted but resolute. She sat across from Poirot, her mind clearly racing. This is most significant, mademoiselle. And you kept this secret to protect Monsieur Jonathan. Clara nodded, tears welling. I loved him, love him still. I thought if I stayed silent, we could move past it. But after Dr. Fowler and Mr. Crane, I can't keep it hidden any more. Poirot rose, his movements brisk. Merci, mademoiselle. You have done well. Hastings, "We must speak with Monsieur Jonathan at once." They found Jonathan in the billiard room, his brooding figure hunched over the table, cue in hand. The clack of the balls ceased as Poirot entered, his presence commanding. "Monsieur Blackwood," Poirot said, "the time for secrets is over. Mademoiselle Clara has revealed your actions, tampering with Sir Reginald's accounts, searching his papers. Did you too know of the letter and seek to destroy it?" Jonathan's face paled, his grip on the cue tightening. "Clara told you? I didn't mean any harm. Father was cutting me out, favoring Clara and that charity. I just wanted what was mine. I took some funds, yes, but I didn't poison him. That was Fowler's doing, not mine." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, you knew of his suspicions, no? The letter, it named you as a betrayer. Did you urge Dr. Fowler or Monsieur Crane to act, to protect your own interests?" Jonathan shook his head vehemently. "No, I swear I didn't know about the letter until Clara mentioned it. I was desperate, yes, but I'm no murderer." Poirot's voice was relentless. "Desperation, monsieur. It drives men to dark deeds. Your actions gave Dr. Fowler motive, gave Monsieur Crane a lever to pull. You were not the hand that held the poison, but you were the spark that lit the flame." Jonathan slumped against the table, his defiance crumbling. I didn't mean for any of this. I just wanted my share." Inspector Japp, who had been summoned by a discreet message from Poirot, entered the room. "Jonathan Blackwood," he said, his tone grim, "you'll need to come with me for questioning. Embezzlement's a serious charge, even if you didn't wield the—"
Clara nodded, her voice soft.
"I'll honor grandfather's wishes, the charity, the estate, and I'll try to forgive Jonathan for our family's sake." Mrs. Blackwood's eyes glistened. "Thank you, Mr. Poirot. You've given us a chance to heal." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the manor, Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression serene. "The truth, it is a light, madame. Let it guide you." Outside, the air was cool and clear, the manor standing resolute against the fading day. Hastings, walking beside Poirot toward their waiting cab, said, "You've tied up every thread, Poirot. The family's got a long road ahead, but you've given them a start." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They weave the threads into order. And now, Marsdon Manor may find its peace." Chapter 15. The Departure. The late afternoon sun cast a serene glow over Marsdon Manor, its golden light softening the estate's stern facade, as if to signal the end of its dark chapter. The household, though still reeling from the cascade of revelations, Dr. Fowler's fatal error, Victor Crane's manipulation, and Jonathan Blackwood's embezzlement, seemed to breathe easier, as if the truth had lifted a long-held burden. Hercule Poirot, his valise packed and his Homburg hat adjusted to perfection, stood in the grand hall, preparing to depart. Captain Hastings, ever his loyal companion, lingered by the door, watching the family gather to bid them farewell. Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, her regal bearing tempered by a newfound humility, approached Poirot, her voice steady but warm. "Mr. Poirot, words cannot express our gratitude. You have uncovered truths we might never have faced, painful though they were. Marsdon Manor owes you its future." Poirot inclined his head, his green eyes twinkling. "Madame, the truth, it is like the sun. It may burn, but it also warms. You and Mademoiselle Clara, you will rebuild with courage and honesty." This, Hercule Poirot believes Clara, standing beside her aunt, offered a tentative smile. "I'll honor grandfather's wishes, Mr. Poirot. The charity will receive its share."
Fowler Poirot's gaze was gentle but firm.
"Mademoiselle, the heart, it leads us astray when fear guides it. Write your stories, but let truth be their foundation.
Inspector Japp, who had overseen the arrests of Fowler and Crane and the questioning of Jonathan, approached with a grin. "You've outdone yourself, Poirot. 3 culprits in one case, Fowler, Crane, and Jonathan's sticky fingers. I'll be writing this one up for Scotland Yard's records. You're a blasted genius." Poirot's smile was modest. "No, Inspector. It is merely method, logic, and the little grey cells. You, with your diligence, provided the canvas. I merely painted the picture." As the household dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the waiting cab, the gravel crunching under their feet. The manor loomed behind them, its ivy-clad towers standing resolute against the fading light. Hastings glanced at his friend, his voice low. "Poirot, this case. It was more than just a letter or a collapse. It was about a family's soul, wasn't it? You saw that from the start." Poirot adjusted his gloves, his expression serene. "Oui, Hastings. The soul of a family, it is fragile, torn by greed, fear, and betrayal. But with truth, it can mend. The letter, the chloroform, the secrets, they were symptoms of a deeper wound. Hercule Poirot, he heals by revealing." Hastings chuckled. "You're a philosopher as much as a detective. What's next? Back to London for a quiet evening?" Poirot's eyes sparkled. "Quiet, mon ami. Non. The world, it is full of mysteries, and the little grey cells, they are never idle. But for now, a cup of tisane and a moment of repose. Then we shall see what the next adventure brings." The cab rolled down the drive, the manor receding into the distance, its secrets laid bare, its future uncertain but hopeful. Hastings leaned back, watching the Devon countryside unfold, and felt a quiet pride in his friend's genius. Marsdon Manor had been a stage of deception, but Poirot had directed its final act with masterful precision. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow